All right, so before we get started, same thing as always. Anybody have any general questions about anything? Um, Anything at all you want me to answer, questions about your exam, about editing papers this week, any issues, anything like that at all that you want me to start with?
Yeah. Um, you know how we went to Miss Alvarez for our TMPs?
Mm-hmm.
Like how we asked her for help. Can we do that with our IWAs?
You could ask her for help, sure. You could
Okay.
reach out to her. I don't know what her schedule looks like or how she's like managing office hours. I'm not sure when she's available, but you could absolutely send her an email and see what she has to say. Sure.
Okay.
I know she's definitely reachable, even on Teams. Like if you wanted to try to message her on Teams, um, I know that she is definitely reachable. Either through Teams or through email is probably going to be the fastest way to get in touch with her. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions? No? All right. So I want to show you two resources today. And again, I'll be posting both of these up on the chat or up in the Teams page later. So you will have access to these if you want to use them. Neither of these are required resources. These are just things that you might find helpful. So the first one, go ahead and do that. The first one is this resource right here. This is something, again, that I created that you might want to use as you're going through your IWA. Now, this would typically, under normal circumstances, be something that you would use as you're writing the IWA. I think now you might want to use it instead as like a checklist to make sure you have all of these things, or to make sure that you found all of these things within the essay. So what this is I took everything from that PowerPoint that we went through on Tuesday, and I kind of put it on the left-hand side of these pages. And then what you would do is you would go through your IWA and you would make sure that you included all of this information. So for example, you would list over here what the significance or the context of your problem was, okay? What the debate was, what the main perspectives in that debate were, okay? What your question was, what your thesis was. So this is just kind of a way for you to make sure that you have all of the information that should be included, so that you can earn all of those points, or as many points as possible, on that rubric. Remember that your IWA accounts for a much greater percentage of your AP score than the IRR does. Yes, we are going to go back to the IRRs, but realize that this is going to be a much larger percentage, okay? Of the 78 points that you can earn, this is 48 of them, okay? So this is, I think that's about like almost 2/3. I want to say that's like 63, 64%. So this is a greater percentage of your score than the IRR is, okay? So you definitely want to pay very close attention to make sure that you're hitting on all of these rubric points, okay? And so then there's even a whole separate box for your thesis here, okay, where we look at what the criteria are for the thesis, right? It has to be succinct, but it can't be overly broad or too philosophical. It can't be something that's too hard to prove, okay? And very important, if you want to earn any kind of points for the thesis, is this one right here that I put in bold. You must actually stake or take a position that can be proven, okay? So your thesis can't be so philosophical that it's not something that we could ultimately prove or disprove, okay? It has to be something that you can answer, or that you can complete within the body of your essay, okay? Within those, that 2,000-ish word limit. So do make sure that your thesis can be provable, okay? There should also be some kind of a call to action, okay? And that could be in your conclusion. Now, what does that mean, a call to action? Okay, what that means is you're explaining to people what can be done to solve this problem. That's what the call to action is, okay? So that if we do this, this, and this is how we're going to solve this particular problem. That's what the call to action means, okay? And then we do have the claim and the evidence for the claim. I put space in here for 3 of them. Remember, I said 3 was a good number. 2 is 1 is definitely not enough. You know, but that ultimately is going to be up to you how many claims and how much evidence you include, okay? If you think about it, each claim should be related to like a separate lens, like we talked about on Tuesday. Okay, so maybe your first claim deals with the economic lens, and then you come down to your second claim, which deals with the health lens or something, okay? Whatever it happens to be. So do make sure that you have at least 2 claims. I think 3 is a better number. 1 is definitely not enough, okay? And so each of your claims need to have data, okay? They need to have evidence. And this is also where you would begin to think about what the counterclaims are and start to provide evidence that would show that the counterclaims are incorrect, okay? And so your evidence goes along with it. Now, with the claims and with the evidence, these are gonna kind of be interwoven. So don't think that you're gonna have a paragraph or 2 where you just talk about claims and then another paragraph where you just talk about evidence supporting the claim. Those, you know, these areas right here for each claim should kind of be interwoven. Okay, so don't think that this line here means that it's a new paragraph. Okay, and like I put here, this potentially might take a couple of paragraphs to get through. Okay, you want to avoid having for your claims like one giant paragraph for each claim. That's a situation that you're going to want to kind of avoid doing. Okay, and so with your evidence, okay, remember that at least one piece of your evidence needs to be from the stimulus material, and it needs to be very integral to your argument. You already should have introduced the stimulus material back up here, okay? But now when you get into your claims and you get into your evidence, this is where you're really gonna dive into it and kind of provide us a lot more information as to why this particular piece of evidence is so central to your claim, okay? So remember that one piece of the evidence needs to be from the stimulus and it needs to be integral. Then there needs to be other information from the stimulus as kind of like a secondary argument, okay? And so like I said, this goes on, okay? Then we get down, after we finish with the claims, right? Then we get down here to our limitations. This is important too. These are points on that rubric as well, which is what are the limitations to your solution, okay? So what are some things that you know, are going to prevent you? Maybe it's financing, okay? Maybe it's the public's desire. Maybe the public isn't ready for this sort of thing yet, okay? So what are the limitations? Again, it could be financial. Try to give a limitation though that's not only financial, okay? Because that's kind of a very simple, almost kind of a cop-out to say, oh, well, it costs money, okay? And in fact, you know, the finance piece should be something that you should address earlier in the essay, like, well, how are you going to pay for this, okay? Maybe you're going to create a tax. Maybe you're going to raise taxes, or maybe you're going to, you know, tell me how you're going to pay for it. Don't just use money as this simple cop-out as a limitation. Try to make your limitations a little bit more complex, a little bit more nuanced than simply saying, well, the limitation is it costs a lot of money, okay? Try to do a little bit better there. And then finally, in your conclusion, okay, obviously you are going to restate what the solution is, okay, what the resolution is, and what your course of action is going to be. So this is, well, how are we going to do this, okay? How are you going to fix this, okay? Think about your big picture at the end of this. What do you want the audience to, you know, what do you want to leave the reader with, okay? What do you want them to do? Okay, are you telling them that they need to go start writing letters or something? Okay, what are you hoping them? Well, no, not even just that. Let me put it better this way. Okay, so for this part, you want to know, like, what do you want them to take away from this? Okay, maybe it's the fact that um, genetically modified vegetables, and I'm just making this up, by the way, this is not true, but maybe you want to leave them with the fact that genetically modified vegetables have proven to increase autism. Okay, that's, by the way, not the case, but maybe that's the fact that you want to leave them with. Okay, and so maybe you spent your whole paper talking about why genetically modified foods are bad, and then the big takeaway that you want to leave them with would be something like, do you want your children to be born with autism? Jesse, please don't answer that. So maybe that's something that is going to be your big takeaway. Okay, and that's like, what is the final image that you want to leave them with? We talked about opening the essay with some kind of a hook, okay, to sort of draw people in. At the end of the essay, you want to leave them with some kind of an image, okay, that they're going to leave with in their heads, okay, something that's going to make them think. Conclusions are also difficult to write. Introductions are hard to write. Conclusions are also difficult to write because you want to leave them with something lasting, but at the same time, you don't want to sound overly dramatic, okay? And you absolutely don't want to end the essay with a sentence that's like, this is why you should not genetically modify vegetables, okay? That's absolutely not how you want to end an essay, okay? Especially a college level report like this. So, again, conclusions are not easy to write. There is no magic bullet. There is no magic formula where you can say, aha, this is exactly what I need to do for my conclusion. Okay, yes, you want to do all of these things, but then you want to end it with something at the end, some kind of a zinger at the end that's really going to make people take something away with this. Okay, and this is the case if you're talking about a written essay like this or a speech, okay, anything like that. So I'm going to post this resource today, okay, and like I said, you can feel free to download it, use it, or not use it. That's totally up to you, okay? I'm going to show you one other example right now. This is pretty brief, okay? This is an example from 2018, so this is 2 years ago, of an outline for the prompt that year, or rather the stimulus that year, was all about farming, okay? It was all about agriculture and fields and, all of that. And so this person, for their essay, this is obviously a fictional individual, but this person for their essay talked about child labor within agriculture, how there are a lot of children that end up doing jobs on farms because their parents own the farms, and whatnot. Okay, so that's what this paper was about. So what they did in their introduction, okay, is they first talked about how on these farms, children are viewed mostly as being assets, and so parents who own a farm typically look to have lots of children because they see those children as being sources of free labor, okay, because it's technically not considered child labor if you're putting your kids to work on your own farm. It's kind of considered chores, okay? So what happens is these people that own these kind of independent farms like this, these are going to be the ones that are typically going to have 7, 8, 9, 10 kids because you can put them to work, okay? And so then in their introduction, they moved on and they talked about deaths and they talked about injuries and how two-thirds of the deaths that occurred on farms were from children, okay? They talked about how they tried to amend the law. The DOL is the Department of Labor, how they tried to amend that law to include farms as being part of child labor, and that did not pass, okay? And so then their question was, should the Child Labor Protection Act being amended to put tighter restrictions on children working on these agricultural farms within America? And their answer or their thesis was that yes, it should be amended. Okay, and then they went into their reasons, and their first lens that they went into was the health lens. And they talked about how the pesticides that are used on that farms are on these farms have these negative effects on kids. Okay, and how it's very disproportionate, because when they're working on these farms, they're working in close proximity to things that are treated with these pesticides. Okay, so they are exposed to it in their food, in their soil, in the water, and in the air, and that has led to a different metabolism rate for these children. Okay, that their organ systems are developing differently. Obviously, I haven't read that article, so I don't know exactly what it is, but notice that that was cited. Okay, and then there was a study that was still ongoing at the time that said that their growth spurts were also affected, okay, and that these children suffered from decreased flexibility and increased susceptibility to certain diseases. So in that first body paragraph, they again talked about in that first body paragraph, they again addressed this from the health perspective, okay. And so then they talked about the tools that were used, okay, and how a lot of these tools, probably power tools, again I don't know, but how a lot of these power tools, okay, typically could be very, very dangerous and could cause severe injuries, and that children that young were not mature enough or were not old enough to be using them, okay. And then they introduced a counter argument, which is that this is just cultural, okay, and that doing work on a farm is the most preferable way in these families for these people to learn or to learn about work ethic, safety, and responsibility, and that they're worried that these restrictions would discourage people from getting into farming, okay. And then notice again that both of these counter arguments are cited, and then this student's rebuttal then is that isn't it better to have workers that are healthy even if you don't have quite as many of them? Because if you're healthy, you're going to be more productive, okay? And so then we get into their next lens. That actually should be number 2. I don't know why I labeled it number 3. But their next lens that they went into, okay, has to do with the hours, okay, with the laws, okay? And so currently, at least as of 2018, because these were family farms, their hours were not limited. Now, what is the problem with that? Why is this a bad thing? Well, because they didn't have energy to go to school, okay? There were, higher rates of school absences among these children because they were tired, okay? And that typically peaked around the 10th grade, okay? Their personal development was also harmed by this, okay? They weren't sleeping as much. They weren't exercising as much. They probably weren't playing a lot of sports because they didn't have the time to do it, okay? And then they talked about how this was not just a problem for these kids, but also a problem for the whole family, for the whole community, okay? Because you are now raising a whole generation of kids that's more likely to get themselves into trouble or more likely to become obese later in life, okay? Or more likely to develop the problems that come with not sleeping as much as you need to, okay? And then they introduced or finished this lens by introducing a counter argument, which is that some of these families need this, okay? They need the free labor or their farms are not going to last, okay? That the families need this money. The rebuttal for that then would be that there are much clearer long-term benefits of going to school than there are having to spend your life working this kind of minimum wage job at best, okay? Because what a lot of people don't realize about these independent farms is that the profit margins there are razor thin. And so a couple of rainstorms one year could be the difference between making a profit that year and then losing money, okay? If there's a drought, a lot of these farms are going to go under. So that is the counter argument, that they don't have the money to pay these workers to come on these small farms, okay? And then notice how this person went into their conclusion, okay? And they said a couple things. They said, firstly, they believe that their first solution should be that the law should be amended so that these people have the same restrictions as people who work other jobs, okay? So there needs to be an age limit as to when you can work. There needs to be limits on the amount of hours, okay? And then as a way to limit the backlash, okay, they propose, and this is the part that I think is a little bit weak in this particular essay, because the way that they talked about limiting the backlash was simply forming a coalition, meaning having a group of farmers get together and say, we support this, and then having them trying to explain to other farmers why this is a good thing. Okay? And then they finish by saying that some states have already changed these laws, okay, but that it needs to be a federal law so that every state gets involved and so that every state changes it, okay? Because what I found out when I was reading this yesterday is that the states that have these laws are states where there's not really a whole lot of farming to begin with. So the states that have these laws are states like New Jersey, okay, or states, you know, where there is not a whole lot of farming to begin with. The states that don't want to pass laws like this are states like Oklahoma and Kansas and Idaho, states where farming is in their blood, okay? So the counter argument there would be that, again, if you have a federal law, everybody's following the same rules, everybody's on the same page, and it sends a very clear message to people about how this country views and how this country feels about child labor, okay? So again, this is just an outline from one student's essay from 2018, so this is a couple of years old. The last thing that I'm going to post, I had a couple people ask me for an example. Oops. I had a couple people ask me for an example, and I have one here that I'm going to post. Nope, there it is. I have one here that I'm going to post on the page today. This was a high scoring example. This is from last year, because this is the one about night shift workers. Okay, so this is a high scoring example from last year. I don't know who wrote this or where this came from, but I will post this paper for you to look at. And so in this paper, you'll see, again, all the things that we've talked about done really, really well here. Okay, so you can see they have an introduction, and then it just goes on from there. Also, the other thing I want to quickly point out about this paper is that they have about almost 2.5 pages worth of sources. Okay, so this particular student used about 15 to 20 sources. I'm not saying that you need that many, but I just want to point out to you that in this high scoring paper with a total word count of 2,191, so they were nine words under that limit, they ended up using, again, somewhere between 15 and 20 sources. Okay, so I will post this as well for your leisure, so that you can look it over and kind of get an idea of specifically what does a high scoring paper look like. Okay, all right, so let's come back here, and does anybody have any questions for me right now about anything that we just talked about? Anything at all I can help you with? Go ahead, David.
How many sources do you recommend for us then?
Okay, that's a good question. There is not a set number. I think 10 is a decent roundabout number, keeping in mind that of those 10, 2 of them right away need to come out of the stimulus package. So now you're looking at finding 8 sources on your own. And so of those 10, I would say probably 6 to 7 of them need to be academic. And then you're looking at like between 3 and 5 additional sources that are going to be popular sources or news sources or things like that. Okay, but again, you could get a perfect score and only have 6 sources total. I mean, it's possible. Okay, I think it's difficult, but it is possible. So there is not a minimum number that you need to have in order to be successful. Okay, I think 10 is a decent number though. Okay, I don't think you need to have 25 sources. I think that's pushing it, especially in a paper that's only 2,000 words approximately. But I think 10 is a pretty good estimate. Okay, other questions? Anybody? Okay, So what we'll go ahead and do then is we'll go ahead and end this call. I will post all of this stuff this afternoon during my office hours. And again, I'll be available this afternoon until 4 o'clock. If you have any questions, if you need anything from me, I'll be on Teams, I'll be on Remind. Just please reach out to me. All right? All right, guys, have a wonderful day. I will see you all later. Have a good weekend, because I won't see you until Tuesday. So have a good weekend. Enjoy Easter if you're celebrating, and I will see you all soon. Goodbye.
Bye.